Hey everybody, I am Audrey. I am from Fortitude and Flow, and I am a coach and consultant that helps really smart people not fall apart. And I specialize in helping people heal and transform their burnout. And we're going to have this conversation today. I'll be speaking with Mara, and we have had some really juicy conversations, and we were geeking out on this topic of talking about deconditioning from a culture that demands and rewards your productivity, which feels especially at the forefront right now. So, Mara, why don't you introduce yourself to anybody that's watching?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mara Glatzel, and I am a coach and a writer and a podcast host of a podcast called Needy. And I work with humans around redefining their self-care so that it actually is sustainable and really works for them in particular, and reclaim their sovereignty through, identifying, honoring, and advocating for their needs, and really just taking up space in their relationships, in their lives, which, a lot of times the people who are drawn to my work are perfectionists and people pleasers, and, people who are recovering from really believing that they need to be somebody other than who they are in order to be loved. And I help those people unlearn some of those beliefs so they can show up as they are and take up that space. And I'm so
Yeah.
excited to be here today. This is such a juicy topic.
Yeah.
Always, now more than ever, for
Yeah,
everyone.
totally. Yeah. So, um, where to even start with this? I think that one of the things that is, so one of the things that has been kind of floating around, and I think really speaks to this concept of productivity, is people feeling like they're not getting as much done right now as they feel like they should be, or people who are working at home with children for the first time in their entire lives, and which I know Mara can speak to a little bit more, which is she'll give you all the hacks that you need to know. But this feeling of feeling like we need to be producing in the middle of a crisis, this is a word that I'm not really seeing used a lot, which I think has for me been a helpful word to hold on to. Has been this is a crisis. I am really bristling against the term the new normal. I think some people are using that term just to help them feel a little bit more stable and sort of acclimate, but this is not normal. What we're going through right now, our lives, our environments, the emotions, the level of stress that is collectively swirling 24 hours a day. This is not normal. This is a very specific moment in time, and which is going to affect, it's going to affect you. It's going to affect you. It's affecting us all in different ways. And yeah, so I'm just curious to see where you might go with that, Mara.
Yeah, I think that the new normal indicates some sort of mastery or understanding of what things are, which I don't feel like I possess that at this moment in time. In my work, I talk about the different aspects of transformation, and I feel like we're in the transformation stage where we've thrown everything up in the air, and we have not much idea at all about what it's going to look like when it settles. And so I think that for me, that idea of crisis is really apt. And especially when we're talking about what is most essential in our lives. And for so many of us, because of capitalism, our productivity is essential, earning, doing, the validation that we receive from earning and doing, the ways that we earn our keep, that's at the forefront. And our care, what's that? It's somewhere off to the side. And what happens during a crisis is that we're really shown where the stress points are in our lives. And I would argue we always need to do this, but we're really being shown how to move that productivity to the second tier, and put taking care of ourselves up there, and being in right relationship with ourselves, and being in good working order. And again, I would argue we always need to do that, because we cannot sustainably continue to produce if producing is our game, if we're not caring for ourselves. But particularly during a crisis, we are humans first. And I hear a lot of people who are like, I can't even parent right now. That's really scary. I can't even be in partnership with my partner right now. I can't be an employee right now because like I'm just so human. And if you're listening to this and you're feeling really human, I mean, I think that's the name of the game. And so many of us are uncomfortable with being really human because it interrupts that natural flow of productivity. You know, it's like, I can't have feelings if I'm, you know, trying to make it through this to-do list. I can't have feelings if I'm just trying to get through the day, but we're having feelings. We're on this roller coaster. We're all superhuman. A lot of us in the same house together. And, you know, so we are being forced is maybe, I mean, I feel forced, but maybe that's too strong of language, but being pointed in the direction of taking care of our needs so that we can sustainably keep showing up every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that I've been talking about more recently is just like the concept of the window of tolerance, which I imagine is something that you're very familiar with. Mara has like a whole background in trauma, which is, she doesn't talk, like Mara doesn't talk about like her training and things that are like really friggin' major. But Mara's got a big background in trauma and counseling and all that sort of stuff. So this is like not anything new, but for a lot of people, this concept of like having a window of tolerance, and how we work as human beings in survival, and how you know, our systems will activate at the sign of threat, which is real or perceived, and especially now it's sort of both layers of that. It's like there is a real threat. How close it is in proximity to us or how much it's affecting us is perceived or real, or depending on, you know, how much news you've consumed today, or what you've kind of seen in your news feed. You know, that kind of, that affects us, how we, if we decide, if our bodies kind of elevate and go towards a fight or flight situation where maybe we're feeling really anxious or angry, or we're blaming, or, you know, that's kind of where we've gone, and we're only supposed to be there for a short period of time. We're not supposed to be living up there. That's when that gets chronic. That's when we get totally worn down, and then we're really screwed, right? And then there's that sort of freeze response, which can be disorientation and just like wanting to like crawl under the covers and never move. And so there's this dance that we're kind of being asked to confront, that's there all the time, right? Like it's always, we're always human. We're always dealing with those survival responses, but especially now when the volume's been so turned up, and like collectively we're all going through the stress together. It's not like we're often, you know, I may have a stressful day, but everybody else around me is okay, and that's helping me to regulate. It's like, whoa, everybody's a bit on the elevated side, locally at least, like the people who are sort of in our circles. There's some people maybe having different experiences, but that makes a big difference. Because somebody asked me the other day, they're like, why is it so hard right now? Like it feels so hard. Like self-care feels like an extra effort. And it's like, well, everything right now is an extra effort. Like just being a human being right now is an extra effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, so when we're looking at that window of tolerance, which I do like love, and I was taught it as the window of containment, which was like old school. And now they talk about it as, which I kind of like, but I actually really like window of tolerance better. And there's a fourth one, which I've been thinking about a lot because it is personal to my like unique flavor of trauma response. So there's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Fawn, yeah.
And, you know, that like what I'm noticing for me is there's a lot of fawning behavior happening. And by fawn, I mean acquiesce, people please, make things nice, wrap things up in a tiny bow. Like for me, I have a visceral feeling when we think about the new normal, because it's like, yes, we want to make it. It's like, it's already digested. It's a teachable lesson. Like here I am. I'm like somehow collected myself in front of you, tied a pink bow on it. And I'm like, we can do this. There's that positivity to it. And I think, you know, there's a lot of pushback against that right now. You know, that people are rushing to like make it good or make it like metabolize the discomfort of the collective in some tangible way. And so I want to like bring that out as a trauma response, because for a lot of us, you know, I see in myself, my primary trauma response is to go from fuck, this is crazy, to, oh, I live here now. Look, here's my things. This is my house. Like, oh, I got a pantry. Don't leave. Don't go outside. Can't see anybody that I love. No problem. No sweat. Like, this is I'm like, have I ever lived another way before this? No, I'm pretty sure I have not.
So relatable. No, it's so relatable.
And that's, for a long time, I was like, oh, I'm so adaptable. This is like great about me. Look, I'm so adaptable. And it's, you know, on the one hand, it is true. It's like there's resiliency in being able to be adaptable. But on the other hand, it's honoring that rush to make meaning, that rush to like put things away. You know, I said we've thrown everything up in the air, and this is like, oh my goodness, I don't like that. Okay, we're just gonna like nothing to see here, you know, to make it okay. And it's to make it okay for ourselves, but it's also to make it okay for other people, and really feeling responsible for other people. You know, I was texting with a friend before this call, and I really noticed there was this moment where I was like, how are you? And she was like, I'm deeply affected. And I, you know, could feel myself wanting to help with that, like to like pour myself into that. And then while simultaneously acknowledging that I didn't have the capacity. So I have a really sick kid today. You know, I was like with her. It just is like, I didn't actually have the capacity to do anything for anybody other than myself. And, you know, just how confronting that is too, for those fawning ways of working in the world and of dealing with stress, that a lot of us are being pointed towards patterns like that also don't work. Like, where am I rushing to fix or make better, to really try to make myself feel better? Because I'm uncomfortable with the fact that like people are just profoundly uncomfortable right now. And so when I think about that self-care again, I think about, how am I expanding my capacity to just like be uncomfortable, which for me, and I reckon for many of us, takes like a lot of energy just to like deal with, I'm uncomfortable. I'm still uncomfortable. I'm still uncomfortable. Like, it, you know, I'm having feelings. I'm like spiraling out into the future. I'm bringing myself back. I'm freaking out. I'm bringing myself back. Like, I just, you know, that it takes so much energy. And if we're not giving ourselves things to, you know, feed and nourish our energy, then we're, you know, going to reach that bottom place pretty quick.
Yeah. And I can relate with so much of what you've been saying, and that internal, I've noticed with myself, there's been a slowdown that I've had to do on certain interactions, because my natural embodied response is to like want to like reach out and to help and to you know, be of service in some capacity. And a lot of what I've just had to be practicing is just sort of being like, all right, you're at your, you know, you're at max. Like, I know I'm at my max, and I know that I don't have anything to give. What I can do is just simply acknowledge what somebody is going through and just say, I'm so sorry that's what you're going through. That's so hard. That's so awful. And just acknowledging, because I think that that's the thing that is also getting a little bit lost in the flurry of what's going on, is what's the right way to respond right now? Like, what's the right way to be? And there is no right way. Like, we're not dealing with the right way to respond. Everybody's response is going to be different, because everybody is different. And, you know, some people are sort of thriving, and some people are fawning, and some people are freezing, some people are fighting, some people, right? That everybody's sort of going in a different direction. And it's sort of like, whatever it is though, it's not pleasant. Like, nobody's having a good time here. So I've just had to be like, and just the nature of who I am, and trying to help. Like, I want help people to feel better, right? That's what I want. That's why I do a lot of the work that I do in my business. So having to have that slow down moment where I start to feel the like outreach in me coming out, and having to be like, whoa, let's like rein it back in. Let's sit here and let this person have their experience and know the value of just acknowledging somebody's experience as being valid is huge.
Yeah, I totally agree. And how uncomfortable is that to do? But yeah, no, it's true. And it's interesting because, you know, when I teach about boundaries and I talk about how like everything that all of our boundaries, like this is our fence, this is like our land. And, you know, here's my partner, here's her fence. It's like right next to my fence. And, you know, and I talk a lot about like fence hopping behaviors. So when am I hopping my fence into her little territory garden and like mucking around and doing things? And, you know, a lot of the time, of course, and, you know, also I do this professionally, so help her all over the place. But, you know, a lot of the times I'm fence hopping, with the desire to be of service, right? It doesn't come from, you know, any sort of like wanting to control somebody or like, you know, whatever. Like it comes from that really genuine place. But this byproduct that happens when, you know, somebody's not paying you, somebody's not asking you for help, but they're just like hanging out next to you and you're helping them, is that, you know, the unintended consequence is that we're showing them that we don't trust or respect them to be able to deal with it on their own without our intervention. And of course, I mean, you know, nobody ever wants to do that intentionally. That's not, you know, but that's an unintended consequence. And so what I think is really interesting about this time, what I think about whenever I notice myself, again, not professionally, but like with my loved ones, like that's where the enmeshment and the fence hopping of all sorts happens. And really thinking about how, when I do just what you said and just acknowledge somebody's experience, what I'm also doing is saying, I trust and respect your ability to navigate this difficult thing.
Yes.
And it's so powerful. And from a perspective of being in that right relationship, I think that, you know, again, another lesson right now, you know, another thing that's happening right now is that we're being pointed back home towards ourselves, towards self-trust, and really figuring out like, okay, you know, in the absence of any real leadership, we're in the United States for those of us who need context, in the absence of any real like top-down national leadership, we're being presented with a lot of opportunities to trust ourselves and also to trust other people to make the best decision for themselves. And, you know, would be so easy to distract ourselves by like getting involved in our, you know, I mean, I'm on the Cape in Massachusetts, and there's a lot of like, who's here? Like looking through the blinds, like there's people here. There's like tourists. They're walking down the street, no social distancing. They are not 6 feet apart. They are not, you know, I mean, there's a lot of policing of other people. And, you know, I think that like coming back to, there's so much freedom and so much like getting us like into that right relationship when we're, you know, just doing that acknowledgement. This is a hard time. Nobody knows what's best. Everybody's doing what they think is best. It may not be what I think is best. Again, that's extremely uncomfortable. And how can we just be with that during this time?
Mm-hmm.
And like, what do we need personally to be with that? For probably quite some time, you know, like the stamina to just be like, I'm uncomfortable again today, all day and again and again. Takes a lot of energy to be uncomfortable all the time.
Yeah, it does. And I think there's something else that I think we talked about before we hit record, is how there's also some elements of like the opposite of that happening, where because everything's been thrown up in the air and we've sort of had to figure out what the essential things are. I've found myself naturally, after I sort of got out of the complete disorientation of, oh my God, what's actually happening, it's almost like I grew blinders immediately, and all of a sudden my priorities became very clear, and the things that really matter became very clear, and the things that used to be sort of on the edges and would sort of pull my attention and sort of distract me, it's like there's no magnetic pull at all there anymore. And it's like all of a sudden I got crystal clear on what I need to put my attention on, what I need to get done. I mean, it's been like amazing to me the amount of stuff that I like, the amount that I got done yesterday in a span of 2 hours was like almost not even human. It was like, oh my God. And it wasn't like an adrenaline filled, like running 100 miles an hour productivity type run, which is like a whole other story that maybe we could like circle back around to in terms of productivity. But it was just like, wow, I just was so crystal clear on like what needed to happen. I just got it done, and I didn't have, some of those peripheral distractions that are often so easy, like, and not distractions like necessarily physical distractions, but just like the mind games and all those sort of things that are often kind of floating around. They're less, they're bothering me like way less than they ever have, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Totally. And I think it's really interesting because it's like when those priorities shake out, like back to our very first topic about deconditioning, like we're in this really intense time where if your priorities right now don't align with what you think is right or good or what is expected of you or what you should do, we're having this it's like very kind of like out of body experience where, for some of us that clarification comes by circumstance a lot of times, right? It's like, I have to show up, I have to make money, I have to pay my mortgage. That's like, has to be a reality right now.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, it's like my priority, it's like, I need to brush my teeth and then I need to sit on the couch, or, I need to make food and feed my children. My priority right now is I need to get outside every single day. And that's like the one thing that's holding me together. So I think about that priority. It's like the one thing that's holding me together, either by need, because I have to focus my attention here because I have like, in order to meet my primary needs, I need to like make money to do that. Or by circumstance where it's like, what's getting me through the day at this point? And so I think that's interesting too, just to point out for people who are on this call that another place that may be really uncomfortable, but also okay, is if what you're finding yourself needing is atypical for you, or not how you know yourself to be, or not how you usually work, or all of those kinds of things, that's okay. I'm like abhorring anything that I'm seeing about like, I saw this like horrible meme this morning that was like about the quarantine 15, which was deeply fat phobic and troubling.
Oh gosh, there's a lot of that going around. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, I protect myself pretty well from that kind of shit, but I did happen across it. And it's like this base idea that we're supposed to like come out of quarantine having like showing our like our little report card or something, like, this is what I use this time for, like, look at me, I have like my beach body, or like I don't know what, like I wrote the next great American novel, or I did anything other than like eating a ton of toast and like watching Peppa Pig with my 4-year-old. I mean, we need to lower the bar of our expectations, and we also need not to judge whatever it is that's getting us through, whatever it is that we need, whatever it is that we're feeling, because and this idea, I've been talking about this all week with my clients, this idea that like someone out there is like doing a better job at quarantining than me. They're like parenting better, or they're like getting more done, they're more productive, they're organizing their closets, they're like working out every day, they're whatever your thing is, that idea that someone out there is doing a better job than you, they're coping better, their like pantry looks nicer, they whatever. That idea is so violent against ourselves.
Yes.
During this very tender time.
Yeah. Yeah, and always, and I think that the one of the things that's so I think one of the I have so many mixed feelings about social media in general, but I think that one of the damaging things about social media is the what we are exposed to is not human. You know, often what we're seeing in people's lives is a very cultivated, produced version that's not reality. And so we as human beings, right, are like looking around, and what we're seeing, we're perceiving like our brains are like perceiving that as that's reality. The reality is the people around me, right, which is the social media sphere. This is what their lives are. And that is, you're right, violent is a really good term for it, because like the reaction that creates in my body is like paralysis, like I am not doing this right, like I'm going to get kicked out of the village, I right, all of these like even survival things in me that's just like I am not okay, like I'm not keeping up with what needs to be kept up with, like I'm comparing, is my version of normal sort of measuring up with other people's normal, and it can't, because it's not possible, because we're not, you know, if we were did not have these screens in front of us and we were just walking around in everyday life seeing normal everyday people around us, we'd feel okay for the most part, right? That's how I would feel, because I'd be like, I'd be seeing my neighbors, I'd be seeing people who are just every walks of life just doing normal things. But when we're on social media and we're seeing all these produced, airbrushed, you know, cultivated realities, it's like no wonder we get crazy.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah, and it's so tricky because I think that you know, we're obviously in this time where we're using a lot of technology to stay connected
Yeah.
to one another and to get news and to feel like we're a part of things. And if left unchecked, this technology is keeping us from feeling connected, feeling like we belong, feeling like we're a part of things. And so it's really important, I think, to keep that in perspective and to really notice, like, you know, why am I the only one who's like sobbing on the bathroom floor? Everyone else is like out in the park, you know, with their like perfect little like quarantine pie that they baked themselves this morning and, you know, reading their favorite book or whatever. Why can't I do that? Like, why is my life not more inherently Instagrammable?
Right.
And, you know, we get to see the entire breadth of our experience. We see ourselves during our Instagrammable moments and also the moments where we're crying on the bathroom floor. And that, so inherently, we're always going to look tenfold messier than everybody else because we're just privy to that part of ourselves. And,
Right.
you know, it's like if you see me, I mean, I try very hard to Instagram as much as transparently as possible, but you know, you are not in my house at like midnight when my partner and my children are all sleeping and I'm like panic texting my sisters about, you know, whether or not my dad should be going outside and who's going to tell him, and freaking out because like, how many pounds of dried beans do I need? Do I have, is anybody still selling dried beans? What do I even do with a dried bean? You know what I mean? You're
Yeah.
not in my
Yeah.
house, like in my
Yep.
bed when I'm at my worst. You know, you're not there when I'm snapping at my mother or snapping at my children a lot. Or, you know, and so
Yeah.
because we don't have that access to other people's lives to that extent, you know, I think we have to like rewrite that story. It's like I just make myself assume that, you know, it's a hot mess at everybody else's house too.
Hmm.
Like no matter, I just tell myself that over and over again, you know, and it's been years since I've been doing that. So it's not as, I don't do it as explicitly anymore, but it's that idea of like, that's not real, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like looking through a magazine, airbrushed, 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 just reminding yourself that the ideal that you're comparing yourself to is quite literally a figment of your imagination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 It's completely true. And I think that just, it just brings us back to that whole concept of what it looks like to be productive, or what it, what that even means. Like, what does that even mean? Um, and I feel like there's through my experience and through a lot of the people I've worked with, there's sort of like the two layers of, yes, sometimes there are unrealistic expectations, or sometimes, a particular, and this is, I'm just speaking professionally in this particular instance, like, if you're at a job, maybe there are some unrealistic expectations, but a lot of the times it is a self-imposed assumption or a self-imposed expectation where, I've had clients basically say, like, I felt like it's almost like there's an invisible boss like staring over my shoulder. Like, if they find out that I'm not literally working the entirety of like every hour that I'm supposed to be on the clock, that like I'll be fired. There's this sort of like story. And for some, and I don't want to negate that story, but it's not necessarily true for everybody. And the amount of pressure that we put on ourselves, and what we think we need to do in order to stay alive, stay a part of, stay employed, whatever the story is, it's not always true. And like the amount of freedom and the actual amount of like quote unquote like mailing it in that we actually can do and actually frees us up is kind of amazing. If like once people start kind of testing those boundaries to be like, oh, actually, like the standard I've been holding myself to is completely unrealistic, and also it seems to be okay when I like loosen the reins on myself. Like I said, sometimes it is an externally held standard, but sometimes it's also an internally held standard based on how we've been conditioned.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. And I think, this shows up in the thoughts that we have about our process all the time. And, how I always think like, okay, like you're a secret agent. You can think whatever thoughts you want. Like you can, inside of your head, nobody knows what you're thinking. Nobody knows if you're like, my daughter just made up this little song that we've been kind of using as a mantra right now, which it goes, I'm strolling, I'm rolling, I'm doing my best. And it's very adorable.
I love
She's
that.
4. And, it's like nobody knows if you're walking down the street and you're like, I'm strolling, I'm rolling, I'm doing my best, like in your mind. Nobody knows if you're pepping yourself up all day long or telling yourself how amazing you are and all of these things. But we don't do that because we feel embarrassed, even like in the confines of our own mind. We're conditioned even in the way that we are in relationship with ourselves. And this is where I think we can do the most deconditioning. Nobody owns you in here.
Mm-hmm.
Owns you. Like your boss doesn't know what you're saying. Your partner doesn't know what you're thinking. Like you get to be your own sovereign leader inside of your own body. And how about you be a benevolent leader? How about you like lead with enthusiasm and love and kindness and compassion? And I remember that time in my life where I would have thought this was bullshit. And I would have said, like, if I'm nice to myself, I'm not going to get anything done. I only get things done because I'm cruel to myself all day long. And I will tell you, this is deconditioning. There's a lot of unlearning that goes into this, but with time and with practice, you get way more done and it feels way better when you operate from that place of like, what am I enthusiastic for? How can I do this in a way that's fun for me? How can I enjoy my life? Like the base assumption that it is possible to enjoy your life is important to hold on to. And I think, this is a place where both of our work, Audrey, yours and mine, really deals with this a lot. It's like, how do I like become a leader in here and change, who writes the rules? Because so many of us are just operating on these default rules of, isn't everyone just beating themselves up to get it done? I will tell you, I am not any longer beating myself up to get it done. And the felt difference of my experience now versus like 15 years ago, when that was how I did everything, is that I'm just no longer afraid of like my to-do list or my plans for my life or the things I want to get done, or even the things I have to get done that I don't want to get done. Because I have this feeling inside of my body, like I'm in this with myself, but we can only create that kind of relationship if we're committed to that unlearning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things that, and maybe we just kind of like scooted over this because we're so acclimated to it, is that there is this sort of invisible, right? There is this conditioning that is invisible that we think of as just the way things are. Like, this is just the way things are. And we have to sort of unvelcro ourselves from that to be like, no, this is something that's been taught. This is something that we've been told from a very young age, that's been modeled to us, that's been reinforced in different ways. And like understanding that, like, just as we learn something, we can learn other things and just because this is a particular model doesn't necessarily mean that is the only model or the only way, or that, you know, one of the things that is so interesting is just being transparent about our own experiences in a lot of ways. And I think that, you know, one of the things that I found is talking about burnout as much as I do, and talking about, you know, what it's like to be burned out and the way it affects people's lives, is like, people are very honest with me, and but it's still in private, right? In private, people will I constantly hear stories about burnout, but people don't want to talk about it in public because there's still this shame. But like, because I've been honest about it and because I speak about it, people are comfortable coming to me about it. But like, this can be possible in like micro pieces of lives on a regular basis. Is like, when you start speaking what your truth of your experience is, and when you start, you know, talking about something slightly different, people's ears are going to perk up. Like, people are going to be like, you know, oh, like there's another way. Like, when you show another way, just in your own way that you are in the world, that makes a difference. That becomes contagious, because ultimately, as we are finding out with a lot of things that we thought were the way things were, and we're working, I'm putting all of these in quotes, if you're just listening to audio, there, right, the cracks are showing. Where things are not working is showing. And let's not go back to the ways that things that weren't working. Like, let's start from scratch. Let's keep going forward in a way that actually does work. And that does start with understanding where you've been trained in a certain way, and understanding where that is actually not the global universal truth of the world, which we've sort of just absorbed as that being the way.
Yeah, I think one of the amazing things that's like horrifyingly happening right now in this country is that like that idea of like who actually is in charge right now.
Who's in charge, right?
Is anyone in charge? Is the idea that somebody knows more than me like a complete fallacy? I mean, you know, there are plenty of scientists and doctors who knew a lot more than me. That is fact. But I mean, just this idea that there's no playbook and everyone is just doing the best they can, making things up the best they can. And, you know, so why not you? Why not in every situation? Which doesn't mean you look outside of, you'd never like form connections or ask for support, but it is like breaking apart this base assumption that there is somebody out there who knows better than me what is right for me. And what if that's just not true? And I think we're being offered an opportunity to really experiment with that, and to really begin to prioritize what we think is, you know, like true, maybe not like capital T true for everybody, but like what's true for me right now? What can I start with that? And I think that can be just so powerful. Scary, powerful, scary.
Yeah. Yeah. What is true for me right now? And I think that question is sort of, I was just looking at the time. I'm like, man, we've just talked for a long time, but I feel like we could talk for a longer time. And I think probably there'll be more of these conversations to be had, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I think that's sort of the takeaway, is just what is true for me now, and being like, asking that as an honest question and being open to receiving whatever the honest answer is, and inviting that honest answer, because on it, many times I get an answer back that I don't want it to be the way it is. Like, I'm exhausted, I'm anxious, I'm scared, I am this, I'm that, like, what is true for me right now in this moment? And it's like, oh, actually, if you embrace that truth, it immediately, it's like a pressure valve just releases. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, all of a sudden you can now move forward and be slightly more functional, because your brain and your body are on the same page, and you're like, okay, what's next?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good place for us to pause our conversation today, because I think it's a really good starting off point, is just starting to ask yourself that question, like, every day. Journal about it, if that helps. But, asking yourself that piece of just getting familiar with
Mm-hmm.
your own truth,
Yep.
is really, I think, how we unlearn these unhelpful belief systems and structures that we've inherited. Tell us where we can find more of you.
So a lot of the stuff that I put out there, I like Instagram, because I find it to be quite, this is actually where we met on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I found Mara's podcast, and that's how we like really met. But Fortitude and Flow is my business. And so at fortitudeandflow.com or at Fortitude and Flow rather, is my handle on Instagram. Fortitudeandflow.com is my website. And that's kind of where I'm hanging out. I'm there a lot. So if you are interested in the stuff that I've been talking about, and you're interested in my perspective on stuff, it's all there. What about you?
I also love hanging out on Instagram. You can find me at Mara Glatzel. You can find me hanging out at maraglatzel.com. Everything that I have, all of the many ways that I offer to support you as you work with yourself are there. But, if you want to just like hang with me, come find me on Instagram. I've been really enjoying making a lot of stories. I've really been enjoying like just, showing as much as possible what it looks like for me to build a positive, loving relationship with myself every single day. And, sometimes that's Instagrammable and sometimes it's not, and I Instagram it anyway. So come hang out with me there.
I love it. Well, thanks for having this conversation. Let's have another one sometime soon.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Bye.